Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
My name is Michael Galpert. Back in 2011, I was interested in seeing how to create an always-on personal assistant service, leveraging different crowd platforms that were starting up or existent, like Odesk or TaskRabbit, Mechanical Turk, and the unemployment rate was really high, and knew that there was a dichotomy between people that had time and people who had money, and tried to create a system that will allow for the two to connect. The issue that and I'm going to go through sort of the issues that I dealt with, and feel free to ask questions that based on what I'm about to say. So one of the things that all these different platforms were starting up, and I think to some extent are still early, as you heard earlier, that TaskRabbit just switched the way they're handling their system, as opposed to from just a job board to hiring directly on an hourly basis. And still, interacting with different platforms are still hard. So the idea behind the company was to create a really frictionless system via email and text messages where you would be able to send in your requests. So I started it pretty, I bootstrapped it and just asked my friends how much they would pay for an always-on personal assistant. Some people said $25 a month, some people said $500 a month, and that's what I charged them. I just Venmo'd them, PayPal, whatever it was, and early 2012 was up and running with 100 customers, and just hired people from various platforms. I would consider Craigslist a platform as well. That is kind of fascinating. You post a job that you're willing to pay someone $15 an hour, and within an hour you have 300 applicants. So that's where I guess the first problem started, is hiring the right people. And I had a pretty big sort of bar to entry in terms of they had to be my personal assistant in order to get started. And what I mean by that, by personal assistants, is because that has become a buzzword. I saw an amazing Kickstarter project today. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet. There's like an AI personal assistant that is like a robot. It's pretty cool. But what I mean by personal assistant is virtual tasks. Nothing was done in person. We hired any tasks that came in that that were in person. We sort of outsourced to TaskRabbit, or at the time there was a service called Exec. There's other services in New York. I started the company in New York at the time. A service called 11. There's a whole slew of them. So we would we created a system to route the requests via email and SMS to the appropriate assistant at the time when training. The idea, someone might be really good, like on Odesk, they have high sort of ratings, or TaskRabbit based on certain tasks, but for some particular reason, they just didn't work out. And that happened on a sort of daily basis, churning through a lot of people. So there was the education part. Oh, one element too, since we were dealing with personal information, we had to deal with background checks, and that process took a while. That was also costly at times based on, I don't know how many people know about background checks, but if you live in different cities over a span of 7 years, it costs to get the data, which is like locked up somewhere, and you have to go in person sometimes to get that information. That we outsourced that to another service, which recently was found out to not actually have secure systems, which I think through the light of Uber and and other services that use them. So finding people that we trusted, that's a big issue of dealing with personal tasks. So the idea of then finding the right person and then training them for number one, our back-end system to be able to handle that, because it's a new service and we were building that alongside of the proper responses. Sometimes responses were open-ended, and the proper sort of grammatical uses that sort of came up. From the educating and then the training and then actually retaining the assistants was hard, because we were paying, depending on different levels and tiers we had, between $15 and $20 an hour at the time. And I actually hired one of my friends, like mom, who was like laid off. She was a chemistry teacher and was laid off and couldn't get a job because she was too experienced, which was like is kind of mind blowing. But she was great, but then needed a I don't know the exact details. I know that she needed to get a mortgage of some sort, or but she couldn't because she was a freelancer. So she ended up getting another job that was a full-time job that was only paying her like $12 an hour. But the banks accepted that instead. So that was something that was interesting, of like retaining people to stay on, or people didn't want to work in front of a computer all day. They wanted to have another job. Like mentioned earlier, someone was a dance instructor. And so this was all temporary work. So we would spend a couple of weeks hiring and then training and educating, and then someone would work on our system for 2 to 3 weeks, and then sort of decide that it wasn't for them. Once, we built out this entire platform ready to go, and we actually built our platform too heavily on the human side of things when we were ready to launch, and we ran into some personal issues at the company, so we decided to focus on the number one task, which was, we were doing a bunch of different tasks. Number one task that we were doing was calendaring. And calendaring, if I don't know, ever built a calendaring system, you're playing with fire when you're building a calendaring system, because of where you're basically instructing where people are going to be and when. And if there's any errors, it can be troubling. So we're up for time, but I'm happy to. I'm here for lunch, here to answer any questions, or you can ask them now.
Any questions? Yep.
Thanks, that was very interesting. So it must have been quite disturbing to discover that the agency and service that you engaged to do background checks maybe wasn't doing the job quite so well. How did you manage that?
At the time when we were working with them, they were the sort of leader in the space. And by the time we were done, we moved off from that type of work, so we didn't have to use them. But it's one of the biggest issues, I think, today with anything that has to do with personal information. There is no system. I'm hopeful that there will be to sort of deal with this. But right now, it's a lot of just paperwork that is not digitized in order to record. Yeah.